Hello again, YouTubers. It's the 29th of August, year 2025. At at Sydney time / Australian Eastern Standard Time and local Beijing time. So, first of all, I would like to thank you guys for a total of 10 likes to my most recent video. Specifically my most recent live stream titled "It Is Inevitable." Regardless of my stutterings and shit and all those involuntary pauses and blah blah blah, so I'm just feeling quite bored and extremely lonely. So though not necessarily that anxious or depressed, beg your pardon. But yeah, just would like to rant more about my shitty life, or about the the intrinsic, the very fundamental nature of life itself and shit. So at this point, I just realized that it is quite impossible to keep your mind satiated. All things considered. In particular, how much of poo and pile of shite YouTube has unfortunately become, and yes, as I mentioned previously during my live stream, YouTube, just stops pretty much, stops recommending quality content to most, if not all, of its viewers. And to make the matters worse, against a certain range of content creators, that can include but are not limited to creators like I. They have essentially throttled organic traffic coming into channels like mine. I can, we can pretty much, all guess and speculate fairly accurately why they do so, why they are doing so, and it's nothing new. That says, they have been doing so for quite a number of years, as far as I can recall. Which renders it even more monotonous, more boring, more more a big yawn, now, especially nowadays, and that, can make, our existing shitty lives even harder to, to cope, to deal with. And in particular, to make the matters worse, in my current shitty circumstance, I barely have anyone to talk to speak with. I so as a matter of fact, you may, probably, consider, me a typical, a typical example, a typical, you know um a typical or a prime um candidate, as, or typical part of the, male loneliness epidemic or whatnot. Yeah. So basically, my current circumstance and my own character, my own archetype, have rendered me highly antisocial, or highly, unsociable. I don't know if it is grammatically adequate, to call yourself someone highly unsociable or whatnot, but you get the idea. So basically, I just, don't find, any face-to-face interactions with other human individuals enjoyable, or you know or satisfying. I just, can't find anyone here near my area, with whom I can, speak in depth, exchanging, some real insights into, life itself, into, what of a shithole the world, the society has sadly turned into nowadays. you know I just, don't tend to enjoy the all those, sorts of, copes, and, namely forms of entertainment, like such as YouTube, video games, even porno and fapping. I just, I don't, that's, that's pretty much precisely, why I said so in one of my, most recent posts, saying that, there's no, in my humble point of view, there's really no such thing as porn addiction. You fap to porno because, mainly because you are either lonely or bored, or both. you know Nothing complex or complicated about the the behavior or the act of watching and fapping to porno in case of males, whereas in case of females, that can, yeah, it certainly can have something, um, some sort of, underlying meanings, or causes or blah blah blah, or some science, scientific or or medical complications of sorts, in case of females, you know, um, suffering from quote unquote addiction to porno. That might have something to do with some scientific or medical complications as we speak. But in my mind, in my point of view, I don't really see anything complex or complicated with us dudes, with us in particular, lonely and depressed and black-pilled dudes watching and fapping to porno from time to time. But that's quite beside the point of this video. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about something that cliche. But you get the idea. Life, it's there isn't really much there isn't really anything magical or sublime about life itself, regardless of your your genders or your ethnicities or whatnot. Even if, yes, I understand that some of you might disagree by saying that, yes, young and gorgeous looking females do tend to to live their lives, say, on a tourist mode. Yes, I do. I do concur with such point of view, but to a certain extent only. There are quite a number of females whose lives are full of sufferings and loneliness and severe mental disorders, such as severe depression and anxiety too. So you can't really come to such an over beg your pardon. So you can't really come to an over generalized conclusion about who has a harder life than who. Not necessarily. There are always some variables that you fail to see, that we all fail to see. Yeah. So, well. So the moral of the story is I guess is that you shouldn't get too upset at your own situation or your own situation per se. Though there is really nothing sublime or magical about life itself, since I no longer believe in the occurrence of miracles or the so-called divine intervention. or whatnot. I guess at least at least I guess in case of ordinary males, ordinary dudes, I guess we all get what we actually we all tend to get what we actually um I beg your pardon. Deserve. We get what we deserve as ordinary dudes. At least in most cases, yes. Though yes, on the other hand, yes, the game we call life is highly rigged. Unless someone of unless someone from a different class or from or from a more fortunate circumstance gives you a helping hand, you stand pretty much absolutely no chance of making breakthroughs from your current shithole, from your current situation of helplessness, and over time, more or less you begin to develop a mental state of learned helplessness or acquired helplessness. I guess either term adequately either term accurately portrays the truths. Yeah. So as the thumbnail suggests, pretty much all of us get stranded in an infinite loop. An infinite loop, bouncing back and forth here and there, east and west, just like the constant oscillation. In between, a mood of hope and a mood of black pill or desperation and depression. Beg your pardon. Yeah, that is pretty much the overall representation of how life works, I guess, at least currently in my case. Don't know much about you guys, since we don't really have any physical contact with one another due to the geographical you know, constraints and blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah, and to make the matters worse, we humans just have so many needs and wants, and not to mention that some of these wants, when left untreated, left unsatiated, over time they can grow into a need. That says, wants and needs, they can, inter convert in between one another, according, to 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 varying from one folk to another. So yeah, that's the most I guess that's the most the most challenging part to tackle, to deal with, to beg your pardon, to cope with. And yeah, like I said, all those copes, their efficacy are quickly diminishing. In other words, they are becoming less and less effective as time elapses, as we get closer and closer to the apocalypse, the Armageddon, so to speak. Yeah, it's just freaking shit. I wish I could do something. I wish, so badly I could do something to change that. But unfortunately, time itself has proven me wrong, has proven me gravely mistaken, about, my own estimation of my chances of success, of making a breakthrough, of making a difference. Well, at least so it seems to me that I shall remain in such state for at least several months more, if not another whole year. I don't know the exact number, and I certainly don't want to know, though I wish I could, just, get the hell out of Dodge right now, right here. But unfortunately, I don't have a sufficient amount of funds to sustain my living and travel expenses along the way, back and forth. And B, my my mental health status still constantly fluctuates and oscillates between a highly depressed mood and just a slightly hopeful mood. But most of the time, it just keeps sinking and sinking. like, you know, the famous ship Titanic. Yeah. Yeah, I can actually sing a bit about, you know, that song. Near, far, wherever you are. Yeah, I just can't recall the lyrics. I beg your pardon. I will need to look up YouTube later. Yeah, that's, yeah, I don't suppose I have much else to share, you know. It's just, I just, you know, feel so bad, so sad about the fundamental nature of life as a human. You know, since, you know, we have so many needs and wants, you know, we need to constantly keep our mind occupied with all those copes, and on top of that, we have to constantly eat food and drink H2O and, you know, breathe. You know, it's just, you know, the human flesh and mind suffer from so many flaws, so many natural flaws and vulnerabilities, you know, that, you know, even with just, you know, one need left unsatiated, it can drive us utterly insane. And I guess, you know, I do, you know, I am kind of, you know, sitting, you know, right at the brink between rationality and insanity. You know, I don't know, you know, how much longer I can keep this up. You know, in the midst of extreme loneliness and depression and beg your pardon. Despair, desperation, you know. Anyway, in any regards, I hope I believe I have talked enough, and in case you have found this video useful, if not entertaining, please consider subscribing and smashing that like. And so yeah, thank you again for watching and listening. So yeah, I sincerely hope that you are having a better day or a night than I am. Until next time, if God's still willing. What an asshole, God. God is such an asshole. Jesus Christ, you are such an asshole for creating me without my prior consent. Thank you again. Cheers, bye, see you around. Stay out of trouble and stay far from weak. Bye.